So we saw some pretty great games get released in May, from The Rising finally moving to a full release, to an early access of Hades 2, which I completely forgot to mention in last month's video, which honestly is a borderline inexcusable oversight. But anyways, moving on to June, we've got a ton of new releases coming in fast that I am very excited about, from full-blown heavy hitters to, well, just some add-ons that I personally really wanted to mention because I wanted to be selfish and highlight some personal favorites. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and start right there and get one out of the way immediately, because I am very excited for the Dungeons & Dragons chapter of Dead by Daylight, which is dropping on June 3rd. So it's been an exciting few weeks for Dead by Daylight already, what with celebrating their 8-year anniversary and throwing out a ton of goodies for the player base, but beyond that, their roadmap is looking very good, chiefly because for D&D fans, you're getting a new killer in Vecna and a new survivor whose perks include the ability to bust out a lute and play music, which is just silly and delightful and just entirely reflective of everything I already love about this game. Now, just to be clear, this Vecna is the D&D lore version and not the Vecna from Stranger Things, but it's already shaping up to be a very cool addition to the game. And beyond this immediate release, the roadmap does show a new licensed killer dropping in August and another in March, which, fingers crossed, we might finally get Jason Voorhees, a prospect that looks even more promising given his recent introduction in Multiverses. Next up, moving on to an actual full game and one that is entirely in line with Dead by Daylight, we have a new entry into the asymmetrical multiplayer horror genre with Killer Klowns from Outer Space dropping the next day on June 4th. Now, I think you could be forgiven for having no idea what this is if you're not a horror fan. In fact, I only know what Killer Klowns is because my buddy Ben from Dead Ringers is a huge horror buff, obviously, and he introduced me to this some years back, but it is what it sounds like. You can play as the titular Killer Klowns from Outer Space, or the survivors, and do your best to either harvest the humans or fight back against the threat of horrifying sci-fi clowns in the interest of survival and escape. Now, I actually have already played this one a little bit. Since I pre-ordered this game, I got to play it a few days early, but trust me, it is positively bonkers, and if you'd have asked me what I thought would be the next license for an asymmetrical multi-horror game in this vein, I would not in a million years have guessed that we'd get a Killer Klowns from Outer Space game. And while I don't think it'll dethrone Dead by Daylight or anything like that as the reigning champion in the space, I'm hopeful that it will at least rise to the level of something like Friday the 13th or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with bonkers cat and mouse gameplay that makes for some really funny moments with friends when it makes its debut next week. Moving on, next up we've got a whole range of games, but I'm just going to generically lump all of them under the Kingdom Hearts moniker because Kingdom Hearts is coming to Steam on June 13th. And they will be dropping basically every game up until this point onto Steam next week, including Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 plus 2.5 Remix, Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue, Kingdom Hearts 3 plus Remind, or if you want to have all of them in one shot, there's Kingdom Hearts Integra Masterpiece, which includes every title to date. These games mean a lot to so many people, and I'm glad they're finally coming to Steam, where I will probably once again buy them, delude myself into thinking I might actually finish every Kingdom Hearts in release order one day, and then go back to countless hours of Dead by Daylight. But honestly, all jokes aside, I am actually excited for this one just because I like the idea of gradually moving some console classics to PC, where I guess I'm hoping that long term they'll be better preserved moving forward, but yeah, long story short, it's a good time to be a Kingdom Hearts fan if you've been waiting for those releases to come to Steam. And speaking of long-running beloved series, the following week we have another Atlus title that's been updated with Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, which drops on June 14th. And this actually took me by surprise entirely, and I wasn't even sure what it was at first. But given that Atlus often releases a director's cut of sorts to complement their original releases, I shouldn't have been surprised to find this out. Now, I still haven't finished the original, which might as well be my catchphrase at this point, but if you're a fan of Atlus's unique brand of demon-centric turn-based combat, this version does include additional story paths, quality of life features, 40 new demons, and a host of other improvements. So if you pass on SMT5 the first time, it might be worth checking out Vengeance since it's clearly a more complete package. And then a few days later on June 18th, we get hashtag Blood, or maybe just Blood. Honestly, I'm not sure how this is pronounced, but even so, this might just be my most anticipated game of the month. I knew nothing about this game prior to getting ready for this video, and, well, just one look at the visuals and you can tell it's going to be a great time. Clearly they're channeling some Cartoon Network nostalgia into these hand-drawn graphics, and maybe a little bit of Cult of the Lamb now that I think about it. But either way, this is shaping up to be a very slick 2D dungeon crawler, and I am 100% here for it. Again, just the visuals alone would have sold me on this game, but I'm expecting that the gameplay is going to be pretty frenetic as well, based on everything that I've seen in the trailers. And then also launching on June 18th, although stepping distinctly into horror territory, we have Still Wakes the Deep. And this looks to be a horror walking simulator of sorts, but what really has my attention is the setting. Still Wakes the Deep takes place on an oil rig in 1975, and maybe it's my fondness for the BioShock series, but that sure seems like an incredible locale for a horror game. The ocean's spooky enough on its own, and throwing in the violent thrashing of the waves on an oil rig sounds isolating in an entirely new way, and I just can't wait to see where the story goes on this one. And speaking of the ocean, a much lighter take on its inhabitants drops the next day on June 19th with Crab God. This seems like the perfect summer game just about, and its gameplay consists of bolstering your crab community during the day and preparing to fend off attacks from other creatures at night, all in the name of protecting your crabling colony and also the egg of the next Crab God. It definitely gives me Lemmings vibes, the way you can assign individual roles to your Crablings, so if you're into this sort of defense game with a tropical twist, it might be worth checking out. Next up, another title that doesn't technically count as a game since it is an expansion, but considering it's an Elden Ring expansion, I'm confident in saying this will basically be an entire game in its own right, and that would be Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree dropping on June 21st. And while Blood might be my most anticipated game of the month, Shadow of the Erdtree is one of my most anticipated games of the year. And if you've played a FromSoft expansion before, then you already know why. I've tried to keep myself relatively clear of any major plot details, but I'll probably still have to go back and watch a bunch of recaps to get reacclimated to the story of Elden Ring since it has been a number of months since I played it at this point. But fans can expect new areas, mechanics, weapons, equipment, NPCs, and of course a whole host of entirely new bosses. Simply put, if you've never had the joy of experiencing a FromSoft expansion before, you are going to be in for a real treat when this comes out because, again, their expansions are basically entire games in their own right. Next up, moving on to more lighthearted fare, the Atari Sprint series makes a return with Neo Sprint dropping on June 27th. Now, I'll be honest, the Atari was very slightly before my time when I was a kid, but I do love seeing deep retro cuts getting new life breathed into them, and that's exactly what Neo Sprint looks to offer. It's top-down arcade racing, and the closest analog I can think of for this sort of gameplay would be maybe the Off-Road series or potentially Blaze Rush, both of which have a similar top-down view of the action. Between the cars and track building on display, this looks like it could be a fun arcade racer to mess around with, and the presentation isn't too shabby either. It is a little weird to me that it appears to only have 8-person local multiplayer and not an online mode, but whatever. If you're nostalgic for the Atari days or just looking for a breezy racer to mess around with, then this one's probably worth checking out as well. And finally, the last game on my list is Spy Anya, Operation Memories dropping on June 28th. And I just randomly ran across this. Apparently it was announced during a Nintendo Direct, but it's also coming to Steam, and it looks to be a sweet little slice of life experience. You'll be playing as Anya, and you're on a mission to create a photo diary. Along the way, you'll collect memories at school and a range of other locations, and this is probably not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but so far the visuals at least look solid, and I've always been excited for games that buck convention, and this sort of reminds me of a game that I wouldn't even know about if it weren't for Tim Rogers, and that would be Boku no Natsuyasumi, which has a similarly lighthearted adventure that plays out from a kid's perspective. From everything that I've seen in this one so far, it looks like it's going to be exactly that, where you're just supposed to sort of take in a range of interesting characters, try to complete your photo journal, and ultimately get lost in a lighthearted story along the way. Again, this probably won't be the type of game for everyone, but if you're looking for something lighthearted, maybe something just to take a break with between beefier gaming affairs, then it's probably going to be one that's worth checking out if you're somebody who values cozy games. Alright, and that's it for this one. Again, not a comprehensive list or anything like that, rather just me trying to whittle down all of the games that I see coming out in a given month to the 10 that I think look the most interesting. So, what about you? Are there any particular games that you're looking forward to, or something I completely omitted from this list? If so, please let me know in the comments below. As far as what's coming up, I do have more emulation videos that are going to be on the way. Still working on that decky loader video after finding a few buggy things about it. And then finally, I will be doing MAVE pickups later this week or early next week at the latest. So, as always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here on the channel with me. I really, really appreciate you. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.